Thank you for your patience. I know it's been a long day. What I would like to do is to present a model that my agency where I work is using to prepare youth to live on their own. I believe that these principles can be applied as a parent, as a member in your own Baha'i community, because we have a duty to help raise all the children in our community. I think that it can also perhaps be applied as members of the spiritual assembly, that I know we're beginning to get more and more situations or issues brought to our attention, and we don't always know how best to help these people that we care so much about. As you're listening to the model of what we use, maybe you can be thinking of how you could apply it even to your own family or any way that it may fit for you. I'd be glad to open it up for discussion or questions if time allows. Okay. Imagine yourself 15 years of age. Things just never seemed to work out at home. All there ever was a lot of fighting. You didn't want to be at home much, so you never followed house rules. Why bother? Nobody cares anyway. When you got in trouble with mom and dad, you didn't really get punished because they never followed through with restrictions. You could lie pretty well. After all, you've been doing it your whole life. Mom and dad weren't around enough to check out your stories anyway. School's boring, so you stopped doing the work a long time ago. Now you don't even bother going except maybe to see your friends. You made one little mistake. You broke into a neighbor's house and were caught by the police. You were just having some fun. No harm done. You'll return the things you took. What's the big deal? So you do a little time in juvenile hall. You've been there so many times already, you could run the system. Only this time you end up in a juvenile justice facility for 1 year. You don't have to do much. Just put in your time and nobody will hassle you. They tell you when to eat, sleep, and vegetate. So it's no big deal. You'll do your time and get back to the streets and your friends. Anyway, you've made new friends here. They're pretty cool. Some of them have been in these camps on and off since they were 12 years old. When your time is up, you have the surprise of your life. Mom and dad say you can't come home. They say you don't follow rules. You lie, and now you steal. They say they can't control you and don't want you home anymore. The juvenile justice system won't hold you because your time is up. You're 16 years old and you're on your own. What are you going to do? You're really scared, but you can't tell anybody that. You've been locked up for so long, your friends are long gone. What are you going to do? This is only one example of a youth who comes to the Emancipation Training Center known as ETC. This youth would come to us from the probation department, even though we get youth from families, from school referrals, from the police department, from the youth themselves who hear about this training from friends. This is just one example. What do you do for this youth who has no other options? He must learn to live on his own, and he's never had to be responsible in his entire life. Normally, this youth would hopefully mature in his 20s to enable him to live on his own. But he can't wait. He has to do it now. Why are these kids in our program? One example I already gave is that they come from us from the probation department. The probation department realizes that these kids do not have suitable home environments and will only end up back in the juvenile system again. So they want them to have training. A lot of times we'll get kids who have run away so many times, or maybe one too many a time. Or maybe they've been gone from home for so long that their family no longer wants them back. Sometimes parents will remarry, and there isn't as much emotional or maybe even physical space left for that child. Sometimes a single parent lacks the emotional support system to provide enough guidance that's necessary for rebelling youth. Other times the youth is refusing to go home, saying that they want their freedom and that they want to be independent. They don't want to follow anyone's rules. They feel that they can live on their own. We're noticing in our program that there are certain characteristics, personality-wise or developmentally, that these youth are showing us. They have low self-esteem. They don't feel very good about themselves. They feel very deeply. They have very, very deep feelings that sometimes they are unable to talk about or that no one has bothered to ask them about. They tend to have few friends. They are impulsive. They have a low frustration tolerance. They tend to want to take the world on their own terms instead of the terms that the world is giving them. And when that happens, that's when they tend to run away, to steal, to take advantage of people. That seems to be the only way that they can get through the world. These youth tend to act out instead of verbalizing what's bothering them, what's hurting them. They'll run away, they'll steal, whatever it is that they're doing, not go to school. They tend to be very concrete, so that when you talk to them of principles and things, that's very hard for them to understand. We need to make it very concrete, very practical, very down to earth, very reality-oriented for them to understand. They learn by doing. If you had them in a classroom, they would be the children that you would have to sit in a corner someplace, perhaps, give them the things that you want them to do, and they would have to manipulate them, and that's how they would learn. They don't learn by us talking to them. They tend not to learn from past mistakes very well. They unfortunately learn from falling down, which is very scary if you're the parent watching this happen. They have very little delay of gratification. They want things now, and they're not future-oriented. We have an intake procedure or a screening procedure that we are not able to take every youth or every family that wants the youth to come to us, because we only have 6 beds available for all of Orange County, which is very small. Also, if we get a youth who has been failing his whole life and we know that he is not ready to take in the training and the counseling that we have to offer, we do not want to set up a youth for another failure. It's better to wait until he is more ready and break down these steps into smaller successes for him. So we don't want to do that unless we have the bed availability and he's very, very much wanting a try. Then we will do it. We're looking for youth who are ready to accept responsibility and who are willing to leave, unfortunately, most of their childhood behind them. They'll still need counseling, but we're still looking for those who are seeming able to put that part of their life behind them for a while. The key to success seems to be those youth who are able to do things that they do not enjoy doing, but still do them in order to meet their responsibilities. For example, can the youth say he is not a morning person, he likes to stay up late? Can he still get up in the morning and go to a job that maybe he is not enjoying as much anymore, but get there on time and do a good job? When we find youth who are not able to do this, we also find that they're usually not able to live on their own for a very long time in a very successful way. We're noticing some developmental issues that also seem to go across the board in these youth that we are seeing. They seem to come from 2 different situations in families. One is when they're being pushed out of the home for some of these reasons that I've already mentioned. They tend to have low trust. They have a fear of failing and displeasing the parent. They see independent training as a threat because they're afraid, out of sight, out of mind. The more independent I become, the more my family will not want me or need me. And if I've been that good child and I please the parents that way and I'm not around, my family may close up around me and not let me back in again. And yet this is the very family that's saying, I don't want you hanging on me anymore. I want you to become more independent. And so there's a block. This youth feels anger and depression and is very dependent. And when he cannot get his dependency needs met, he becomes more depressed and more angry and will try to hang on even tighter. The other life situation is when the youth is pushing away the parents or the family. And it's as if he's saying the only way that I can get my identity is to physically separate myself from my family. So I need to push away a little bit. Sometimes this youth has not been given enough love and has shut down and has been feeling alienated for a long time. A lot of times this will be an adopted child. We see a lot of adopted children come through our program. And it's as if they're feeling so alienated for some reason, and part of that has to do with identity. You do not get your identity until you're in your 20s. So it's hard enough to be an adolescent without knowing who you are. But to not be able to look at who your parents are and to know that you will probably not go too far from the apple tree. These children don't even have that. They feel anger towards any kind of authority. They want their freedom, but they're afraid of the responsibility. They're afraid of failing, but they won't say that. And it's very difficult for them to ask for help. And so these become some of the developmental issues or the blocks that get in the way of these youth who need to live on their own. What would happen to these youth if it wasn't for a training program like this? Or what happens to these youth who are not prepared for living on their own when they have to? One thing is that they lack confidence to get a job except for fast food. And I know from living in California that working in a fast food place is very, very difficult to support yourself. They have anger towards authority, so they resist job requirements and responsibilities and could end up getting fired. They're afraid of failing, so they keep themselves from trying as hard as they can, which usually ends up that they don't get the job done to the standards that they need to, and they could get fired. They won't go to work at all, or maybe they'll go in late. They have no understanding of money issues, so they spend money just as they bring it in, not understanding that they're going to need to have that rent there, that their landlord is not going to be like their parent maybe and say, okay, you can pay me next week. Their social skills tend to be very low, and they take advantage of family and friends, and pretty soon they have no one else to stay with. They've gone from household to household to household and have not followed rules, have not contributed, and they're no longer welcome there. Often these youth break the law, especially the boys that we see, in order to get back into the juvenile system so they can be taken care of and also to see their friends who are already there. Other times these youth will hit the streets, and the only way that they can earn money is either through prostitution or selling drugs, unfortunately. ETC takes 6 years of developmental growth and attempts to simulate those life experiences in only 4 months, which is the length of time that we've been allocated by the county for each child coming through the program. We are known as the last chance place for these youth. After us, it's the streets. The ETC group home is the best of all the options. How is this done? There are 2 major areas of training. One is independent living skills training, known as ILS, and the other is called personal growth. ILS teaches areas of money management, finding housing, employee maintenance, household maintenance, drug education, meal planning and preparation, sex education, personal health care, and job search. How do we teach these skills? ETC has ILS groups 1 night a week. The youth must pass a proficiency test to proceed on to the next level. There are readings on these topics that they are tested on as well. They are working full-time, going to school 1 night a week and doing 14 hours of homework a week. They're cooking house meals and taking an active part in budgeting their money. We have broken the job search process into 25 steps that they must follow, and we have developed these workbooks for independent study that we will soon be marketing. When the youth leaves ETC, he will have at least $600 in the bank, a place to stay, a job for a few months, and would have been paying us $100 a month rent since he began his job. In the area known as personal growth, we deal with the developmental issues of the youth, as well as the behaviors that have brought him to his present situation. One night a week, we teach communication skills such as assertive training, decision-making, and anger control. Another night, we hold a process group where the youth practice the skills they are learning in communication. In addition, we do individual therapy where we facilitate the youth in unblocking his potential by replacing his negative behaviors with newly learned positive ones. We are a 24-hour treatment facility, which means the staff is always working on these issues with the youth through the structure of the program. I would just like to talk a little bit on how our program, even though we are non-sectarian, we have been using Baha'i principles all along, that we are not able to tell the youth they are in fact Baha'i principles, but we believe very strongly in them, and we use them in the program. I have recently had the opportunity of listening to a tape of Hand of the Cause, Mr. Faizi, speaking on the education of children. According to the writings, Baha'i principle tells us that a child is a treasure house of God. The child is entrusted with jewels or talents by God, and it is the duty of every parent to explore these talents. The writings tell us that we must find these jewels, polish them, and facilitate the world in benefiting from these jewels. ETC attempts to uncover some of these jewels, possibly for the first time in this youth's life. Abdul Baha said that parents must teach the child by 5 years of age manners, politeness, and love. He said these are even more important than reading and writing at this age. Through ETC's manner of discipline and communication with the youth, we attempt not only to teach these principles, but to model them. Regarding discipline, Baha'i principle tells us that we must never beat a child or we will break the spirit. Centuries of Arabian horse trainers have long known this principle of discipline. Abdul Baha spoke of reward and retribution as being the two pillars of justice. Through our system of logical consequences, ETC teaches the youth he is responsible for his actions, and he must feel the natural consequences of his behavior. Tongue lashing, according to the writings, is even worse than beating a child. ETC believes in treating others with respect at all times, even when angry, and expects this of the youth as well. We use consultation as a means of problem-solving house issues among the youth. Youth come to us from all neighborhoods of Orange County, from wealthy families to the street gangs of the barrio. The group home is very small, even for the 6 youth who live there. There is no room for racial prejudice. The youth must learn to live together by necessity. They soon learn that fear of growing up permeates all colors. Perhaps for the first time ever, we have been given specific standards and guidelines for educating our children. The Baha'i writings tell us that we must accept the responsibility we have been given. Baha'i principle affirms the concept of independent investigation of truth. How can a child do this when he has not first been given the Baha'i principles and guidance with which he will investigate? Before a child learns to stand, he is first guided by his parents' loving hands. Not only is the Baha'i education a wonderful gesture of love, it is our duty according to our own writings. What better loving hands with which to reach out? Finally, in the prayers of Abdul Baha, we are taught that if we can awaken one's prospects and opportunities for life, one will be much better prepared for living. Ideally, a child is awakened by 5 years of age, but ETC believes that a late awakening is better than to be asleep one's entire life. If as individual Baha'is we strive to impact the non-Baha'i world by example, imagine the impact we could have as individual Baha'i families. Thank you.
Maybe for a few minutes, if you have any question, please.
The question is, do we accept youth who are not exactly wanting to come? We are strictly a voluntary program. The way we put it is that we are the best of bad options. These youth need to grow up, and sometimes they realize that we are all they have right now, and that they're going to be 18 very soon, which in California is legal age, and no one is going to be able to help them then. So it's strictly voluntary.
Yes.
Only Baha'i in my program. I don't I'm not allowed to tell them they are using Baha'i principle, but I am the main counselor. I'm the senior counselor there, and I have developed the clinical aspect of the program. So I was fortunate to be able to have an influence in putting it together. As far as our success rate, to answer your first question, my dissertation is on partly the success rate. We want to know what kind of youth, where they are developmentally, who are the ones who are able to make it, who are the ones who are not able to make it. So we do that by measuring them with tests in the beginning and at the end of the program. Our success rate in completing the program is unfortunately very low. We feel, and we have not resolved this yet, we feel that if we lower our standards in training and more of the youth graduate, we are taking away how they are learning these skills, and we are cheating them. So we maintain our skills and we allow them to return later if they are within our age requirement, that maybe they'll be more ready by that time. We're finding that no matter how short a stay they have with us, they are walking away with something. We have youth come back to us maybe a couple of years later and they'll say, I fell down a little bit more after I left you, but now I remember what you were telling us. So we've changed our definition of success. Thank goodness, because it would be real dreary otherwise.
Yes, please.
Okay. I am aware of that saying of Abdu'l-Baha that beyond the age of puberty there is not a great degree of change that can happen. I understand that. I also feel a responsibility to try. And when this gentleman was talking about our success rate, it's not very often that I get someone to succeed. I just had someone come from a barrio in a street gang whose parents were killed and murdered from drug-related offenses. And he turned himself around and is going to be making $1,400 a month, has $1,200 in the bank, is living on his own, is being assertive, is in a caring relationship with a young woman. I don't see this as often as I would like to, but when I see it, it gives me hope that it can happen. And if I was that youth, I would want someone to be trying with me too. That's how I have personally resolved it. I'm sure I don't have time to go into exactly how we do it, but I can give you an example. We put these youth on a point system so that we say, number one, it is a privilege to be there, which in a sense it is a privilege to live in your home. You can do that as parents. We say there are responsibilities that you must meet. When you do not meet a responsibility, there is a natural consequence. For example, if I give a youth some money to go to the store and he says, I need to get some underwear, and he needs to bring back the receipt and the change, and he says, well, I lost my receipt and it cost more money than what I thought it did. Well, then what I would do is subtract that from maybe his allowance or pocket money that he would be getting. And he would feel the natural consequence of his choice to go the other way. And that's just one example of how we operate in the program. We look at what will motivate someone, and we use that not as a punishment, but to motivate them in a positive way, to get them going.